"Sit down. You're just a maintenance engineer." The shout echoed through the cabin as the control systems failed catastrophically. Passengers screamed in terror while flight attendants wept helplessly. The brown-haired woman quietly opened her wallet, revealing a tarnished silver badge with faded numbers. She grabbed the microphone, her voice steady. "This is Falcon One. 236 souls aboard, taking control." Outside, the F-22 escort formation froze in disbelief. A pilot whispered over internal comms, "Falcon One, we attended her funeral." Claire Whitlock sat quietly in seat 14C of Atlas Flight 217, a routine commercial flight from New York to London with a technical stop in Reykjavik. At 35, she had the understated appearance of someone who preferred to blend into crowds rather than stand out from them. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a practical low ponytail, and wire-rimmed glasses gave her the studious look of an office worker. She wore a crisp white blouse, a navy blue pencil skirt, and comfortable flats, the uniform of a traveling professional. To her fellow passengers, she was exactly what her boarding pass indicated, an aerospace systems engineer heading to a maintenance conference in London. Her carry-on was a silver Pelican case containing what appeared to be routine diagnostic equipment, software-defined radio units, electrical bus testing tools, SMA cables, backup battery cells, and ADSB dongles for technical demonstrations at the conference. During the pre-flight small talk that filled the cabin, several male passengers made the kind of casual comments that Claire had learned to ignore over the years. "Maintenance engineer, huh? So you basically count bolts and check oil levels?" chuckled a businessman in an expensive suit. Another passenger adjusted his tie and smirked. Someone that well-dressed should be in public relations, not crawling around aircraft frames. Claire simply smiled politely and didn't engage in arguments. When an elderly woman needed help reaching her seat by the window, Claire quietly gave up her aisle seat. When a young boy in the row behind struggled with his seatbelt, she turned around and helped him fasten it properly. The senior flight attendant, a professional British woman with decades of experience, noticed Claire's behavior with interest. There was something about the way the quiet engineer glanced at the cabin's status lights and tilted her head slightly when listening to the aircraft's systems. The observational habits of someone who understood aircraft operations at a deeper level than most passengers. Shortly after takeoff, Atlas 217 received a route change directing them around the North Atlantic through the Guyot Gap due to severe weather patterns. NORAD assigned a pair of F-22 Raptors to provide overwatch during the Greenland-Iceland corridor segment due to reports of unusual radio interference in the area. Claire made notes in a leather notebook, occasionally glancing at the weather radar display on her seatback screen before closing it and returning to her technical manuals. A businessman noticed a silver badge partially visible in her open wallet and laughed dismissively. "Military souvenir? One of those replica things to look cool, right?" Claire gently pushed her glasses up her nose, closed her wallet, and remained silent. The elderly woman in 14B would later tell investigators, "She gave me her seat and pulled a blanket over me when the air conditioning was too cold. I thought she was just a kind office worker." What none of the passengers knew was that Claire's Pelican case contained equipment that went far beyond standard maintenance tools. Hidden among the legitimate diagnostic devices were specialized military-grade communication systems, electronic warfare countermeasures, and backup navigation tools that civilian aircraft weren't supposed to carry. Her leather notebook contained not just technical specifications for the conference, but detailed frequency allocations, emergency protocols, and contact information for military communication networks that officially she shouldn't have access to. The silver badge in her wallet wasn't a souvenir or replica. It was a genuine military aviation insignia that had been officially retired along with its owner's supposed death 7 years earlier. For 7 years, Claire had lived quietly as a civilian aerospace engineer, using her technical expertise to improve aircraft safety systems while keeping her military background carefully hidden. She had chosen anonymity over recognition, peaceful problem-solving over combat operations, civilian life over the classified world she had once inhabited. But as Atlas 217 approached the most dangerous part of their North Atlantic crossing, old instincts that never truly fade began stirring in response to subtle signs that something was about to go very wrong. The radio interference reports weren't random atmospheric disturbance. The F-22 escort wasn't routine overwatch. And the specialized equipment in her Pelican case was about to prove that some preparations are made not for the disasters you expect, but for the ones you pray will never come. Claire Whitlock, maintenance engineer, was about to disappear forever, and Falcon One was about to return from the dead to save 236 lives. 2 hours into the flight, as Atlas 217 entered the gut corridor between Greenland and Iceland, the aircraft's electronic systems began failing in a cascade of malfunctions that turned a routine flight into a nightmare. SATCOM went dark first, cutting off satellite communications with ground control. VHF guard frequencies filled with static and interference. The ADS-B transponder that allowed air traffic control to track their position stopped transmitting. The autopilot began flashing warning lights as navigation systems provided contradictory information. The captain struggled to maintain level flight manually, while the first officer sweated over instruments that were providing false readings. Indicated airspeed jumped erratically as GPS spoofing confused the flight management system, and the altimeter readings drifted dangerously as the aircraft's position became increasingly uncertain. The massive commercial airliner began to shake and shudder as the pilots lost their electronic aids one by one. Oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments as the aircraft's automated systems responded to what they perceived as multiple critical failures. In the cabin, 236 passengers erupted into panic. Children screamed in terror while adults prayed, wept, or frantically tried to send final messages to loved ones through cell phones that couldn't connect at cruising altitude. A male passenger near Claire shouted over the chaos, "Sit down! You're just a maintenance engineer. Let the real pilots handle this." Claire stood up, removed her glasses, and pulled on thin technical gloves. The transformation in her demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. The mild-mannered office worker was gone, replaced by someone with absolute focus and purpose. She approached the flight attendant and requested access to the E&E compartment, the electronics and equipment bay located just forward of the cockpit, where the aircraft's critical systems could be accessed for maintenance. A panicked passenger grabbed her arm. "You'll break the airplane! You don't know what you're doing!" Through the partially open cockpit door, the captain's strained voice called out, "We've lost COM 2 radio completely. Only HF is working intermittently. If there's an engineer aboard, we need help now." Claire slipped into the cramped electronics bay and knelt beside the maintenance panel, opening her Pelican case to reveal equipment that made several nearby passengers do double takes. This wasn't standard diagnostic gear. It was sophisticated electronic warfare equipment disguised as civilian tools. She quickly disconnected the COM 2 radio from Bus A and jumpered it to Bus B, creating a temporary ground connection with flexible copper strips while simultaneously plugging her software-defined radio into an independent power source. Her movements were precise and confident as she ran adaptive filtering algorithms to clean the interference from 243.0 megahertz, the UHF guard frequency that every military pilot monitored for emergencies. COM2 came back to life, its transmit and receive lights beginning to flash normally. Claire pressed the push-to-talk button and transmitted with the calm professionalism of someone who had done this many times before. "This is Falcon One, 236 souls aboard, taking control. High above, the F-22 flight leader nearly stalled his aircraft in shock. Falcon One? That's impossible. We attended your funeral." Claire didn't waste time on explanations. She quickly briefed the F-22 pilots on their situation. Autopilot degraded, flight management system spoofed, inertial navigation drifting, approximately 0.6 nautical miles per minute. Request safe navigation vector. NORD command immediately broke into the frequency. "Falcon One, verify your identity immediately." Claire's response was crisp and professional. "After these 236 people are safely on the ground, currently need navigation guidance that doesn't rely on GPS." The F-22 flight leader changed formation, flying lower to provide visual reference points while his wingman spread formation lights to create a navigation corridor. Using her software-defined radio, Claire isolated the jamming signals and applied adaptive filtering to clear the communication channels. She switched COM 2 to backup frequencies and locked them using pilot tones that she transmitted herself. She then guided the captain through analog navigation techniques that predated GPS, flying by VOR radials from Keflavik, using mechanical compass readings and calculating position through time and terrain recognition. Follow the VOR radial from BIKF, she instructed the captain. Use the standby analog instruments. Dead reckoning navigation like the pilots did before satellites. The F-22's radar detected the source of the jamming, a small aircraft without a transponder that was deliberately targeting commercial flights. The wingman moved to intercept while the flight leader engaged electronic countermeasures to break the jamming pattern. In the cabin, passengers remained terrified but began to notice that someone was taking charge of the situation with remarkable competence. Claire's voice came over the intercom system. Ladies and gentlemen, please ensure seatbelts are securely fastened and assist anyone near you with their oxygen masks. We will survive this through discipline and cooperation. The businessman who had shouted at her earlier now sat with his head down, holding his wife's hand. The elderly woman in 14B whispered prayers while watching Claire work with growing amazement. But Claire wasn't finished with her demonstration of skills that went far beyond maintenance engineering. She opened guard frequency on a wide transmission band and spoke clearly, without emotion, directly addressing everyone listening. To those who called me just a bolt-counting engineer. Today, data and discipline are bringing 236 people home safely. Falcon One ends the debate here. The F-22 flight leader responded immediately, his voice thick with emotion. Falcon One, salute. The entire sky goes silent to listen to you. Both F-22s executed deep wing tilts alongside the commercial airliner, the military's highest form of respect for a fellow aviator. NORAD command cleared the frequency. Atlas 217, you are cleared for emergency approach to BIC runway 19. Follow Falcon corridor. Claire maintained communication control, counting cadence for the captain as they approached the runway. Crosswind left at 80 knots. Adjust 5 degrees right. Hold steady. Her voice remained as steady as a metronome, providing the kind of calm guidance that allowed the flight crew to focus on flying rather than worrying about navigation. As they descended toward Keflavik, the electronic jamming began to fade, and the lights of the runway appeared like a path to salvation. The senior flight attendant later said, I saw her hands shake slightly, but her voice was like steel cable. That's when I knew we had a chance to survive. What the passengers were witnessing was the return of someone who had been officially dead for 7 years, using skills that she had hoped never to need again, saving lives while the world watched in amazement. Atlas 217 was about to make the most famous emergency landing in aviation history, guided by a ghost who refused to let 236 innocent people pay for the failures of others. As Atlas 217 approached Keflavik Airport under emergency conditions, the full scope of what was happening became clear to military commanders, monitoring the situation from multiple locations. NORAD command broke into the frequency with urgent demands. Falcon One, confirm your identity and authorization codes immediately. Claire's response was professional, but carried an edge that made everyone listening pay attention. After these 236 passengers are safely on the ground, currently coordinating emergency approach with damaged navigation systems, the F-22 flight leader made a command decision that would be debated in military circles for years. He changed his formation to provide visual reference points for the commercial airliner, flying dangerously low through the approach corridor. Falcon One, we're going to trust you with civilian lives based on what we're hearing. But if you're really who we think you are, you know the stakes. I've never let civilians die on my watch, Claire replied. Not starting today. Using her software-defined radio array, Claire isolated each jamming signal and applied real-time adaptive filtering to clear the communication channels one by one. She switched COM2 to backup frequencies that weren't in standard commercial aviation manuals and locked them using military pilot tones. Her technical expertise went far beyond what any civilian maintenance engineer should have possessed. She was conducting electronic warfare operations from the cabin of a commercial airliner, using equipment that officially didn't exist. The F-22 wingman's radar had tracked the jamming source to a small, unidentified aircraft operating without a transponder. Falcon One, we have the source of your problems. Engaging countermeasures now. Copy that. Maintain overwatch until we're on the ground. But Claire was coordinating more than just radio communications. She was teaching the captain and first officer how to fly using techniques that predated modern aviation technology. Follow the VOR radial from Keflavik BEKF, she instructed. Use your backup analog instruments. Calculate position using time, speed, and magnetic compass. This is dead reckoning navigation, the way pilots flew before GPS. Her knowledge was encyclopedic and precise. She guided them through wind correction calculations, helped them compensate for magnetic deviation, and provided backup altimeter readings using atmospheric pressure formulas. Captain, your indicated airspeed is compromised by the jamming. Use throttle position and engine parameters to maintain approximately 180 knots approach speed. First officer, ignore the GPS altitude. Use the pressure altimeter and visual references to the F-22s. In the cabin, passengers who had been screaming in terror began to realize they were witnessing something extraordinary. The woman they had dismissed as a simple maintenance worker was demonstrating knowledge and skills that belonged in advanced military training programs. Claire's voice continued over the intercom with instructions that somehow made everyone feel safer. Ladies and gentlemen, we are executing a precision approach using backup systems. Please remain seated with belts fastened. Anyone sitting near children, please assist with their oxygen masks. The businessman who had mocked her earlier was now listening intently to every word she said, his earlier arrogance replaced by gratitude and amazement. But Claire had one more demonstration to give, one that would settle any questions about her identity once and for all. She opened the guard frequency on maximum transmission power and broadcast to every military installation, commercial aircraft, and emergency service within 500 miles. This is Falcon One to all stations monitoring this frequency. 7 years ago, I was declared killed in action during Operation Ghost Valley to cover up command failures that cost 12 good people their lives. The transmission was being recorded by multiple intelligence agencies and would be analyzed for months to come. Today, 236 innocent civilians are alive because someone you buried refused to stay dead. To every pilot, controller, and commander listening, when you abandon people in the field, some of us survive anyway. And we remember. The silence that followed was deafening. Across NATO command centers, senior officers were scrambling to understand how someone officially listed as KIA was conducting military operations from a commercial airliner. Then the F-22 flight leader's voice cut through the silence. Falcon One, on behalf of everyone who failed you 7 years ago, we salute your return. Both F-22 Raptors executed the deepest wing tilt possible while maintaining formation, their navigation lights creating a corridor of honor for the damaged commercial aircraft. Thunder Lead, I don't need your salute, Claire responded. I need you to remember that when you write people off as acceptable losses, some of us refuse to be acceptable. Nord Command finally acknowledged what everyone else already knew. Atlas 217, you are cleared for emergency priority approach to Keflavik runway 19. Follow Falcon One's guidance. As they descended through the clouds, Claire maintained communication control with the same precision that had made her legendary before the world decided she was dead. Captain, crosswind is gusting left at 25 knots. Adjust approach heading 5 degrees right. First officer, watch your vertical speed. Target 500 feet per minute descent. Her voice remained steady as a metronome, providing the kind of calm technical guidance that allowed the flight crew to focus on flying rather than panic. Tower ATLAS 217 on final approach. Emergency services standing by. We have minor system damage, but all souls aboard are safe. The aircraft's approach was textbook perfect despite the electronic warfare environment and damaged systems. Claire had taken a catastrophic emergency and turned it into a controlled situation through superior technical knowledge and unshakable professionalism. As the main landing gear touched down on runway 19, the cabin erupted in cheers, tears, and applause. All 236 passengers were alive and unharmed. The F-22s made one final pass over the runway, their pilots removing their helmets in salute as they watched Claire disembark from the aircraft that she had guided to safety through skills that officially didn't exist. Falcon One, came the final transmission from Thunder Lead. You just reminded us what honor looks like when it's stripped of bureaucracy and politics. Claire's response was barely audible over the engine noise as the aircraft taxied to the terminal. Honor isn't about following orders. It's about bringing people home. Ground control at Keflavik would later report that the precision of the approach and landing was so perfect that it looked like it had been flown by computer, despite the fact that all electronic navigation aids had been compromised. But the most remarkable aspect of the entire incident wasn't the technical expertise or the electronic warfare skills. It was the fact that someone who had been betrayed by her own system, declared dead to cover up command failures and forced to rebuild her life as a civilian, had still chosen to risk her carefully constructed anonymity to save the lives of people who had mocked and dismissed her just hours earlier. As Atlas 217 came to a complete stop and the engine spun down, Claire quietly packed her equipment and prepared to disappear back into the crowd of emergency responders and journalists flooding the airport. She had proven that some ghosts refuse to stay buried, especially when innocent lives hang in the balance. And she had done it with such technical precision and moral authority that the entire military establishment would spend years trying to understand how they had let someone so valuable slip through their fingers. But for now, 236 people were safe, and that was all that mattered to the woman the world had thought was dead. The wheels of Atlas 217 touched down at Keflavik Airport with barely a bump, a perfect landing despite the electronic warfare environment and compromised navigation systems. As the aircraft taxied to the terminal, the cabin erupted in a mixture of relief, gratitude, and amazement. All 236 passengers were alive and unharmed, saved by someone they had dismissed just hours earlier as just a maintenance engineer. The F-22 pilots made one final pass over the runway, removing their helmets and standing in salute within their cockpits as they watched Claire disembark from the aircraft she had guided to safety. When the cabin door opened, the captain stood at the aircraft exit with tears in his eyes. "Thank you for teaching us how to fly when everything electronic failed. You gave us back the fundamentals." The businessman who had mocked her earlier approached with his head bowed. "I'm sorry. I thought you were going to break something. It turns out you were fixing everything." Claire's response was characteristically understated. Maintaining order was the first rescue. Fixing the signal was just the technical part. Icelandic and British journalists swarmed the airport, but Claire declined to show them her silver badge or discuss her background. "Give credit to the flight crew and the 236 passengers who followed emergency procedures," she told them. In the terminal's emergency waiting area, a senior flight attendant found a piece of silver tape that had fallen from Claire's equipment case and placed it on the information board with a handwritten note. "Signal saves lives." Internal Air Force communications were buzzing with confirmation of what many had suspected. Falcon One, the engineer we declared dead during the jamming incident 7 years ago, is very much alive. Word spread quickly through military networks that someone who had been written off as an acceptable loss had just demonstrated why she had been considered irreplaceable before politics and bureaucracy intervened. The passengers began sharing their stories with anyone who would listen. She looked like any other office worker, but she moved through that electronics bay like someone who had been in military operations before. When she told us to stay calm and follow procedures, there was something in her voice that made you trust her completely. She put her equipment case between herself and the most dangerous electrical components while she worked. That's when I realized she wasn't just fixing things randomly. She knew exactly what she was doing. The way she coordinated with those fighter jets, it was like watching a choreographed dance. She spoke their language perfectly. Social media exploded with hashtag #SignalSavesLives as passengers shared photos and videos from the flight, though most of the critical technical work had happened in areas where civilians weren't allowed to record. The most powerful testimony came from the elderly woman who had been sitting in 14B. "She gave me her better seat and helped me with my blanket. I thought she was just being kind. Later I realized she was positioning herself to access the equipment bay quickly if something went wrong. She had been prepared for this emergency the entire time." European aviation safety authorities began requesting copies of Claire's technical modifications, though much of her work involved classified military equipment that couldn't be discussed publicly. The captain of Atlas 217 gave an interview that would be replayed countless times. "She taught me to fly without GPS, without autopilot, without any of the electronic systems we depend on. Those are skills they don't teach in commercial aviation anymore. When everything failed, she gave us back the fundamentals of flight. Emergency response teams noted something unusual about the entire incident. Despite having 236 passengers in a life-threatening emergency, there had been no injuries, no panic-related medical issues, and no disciplinary problems during the evacuation. She maintained order through competence rather than authority, observed a crisis management expert. People followed her instructions because she demonstrated knowledge and calm under pressure. The F-22 pilots who had escorted the flight broke protocol to give interviews acknowledging what they had witnessed. We thought we were responding to a routine electronic interference incident. Instead, we got to watch a legend return from the dead and save civilian lives using skills we thought were lost forever. Comment signal saves lives if you believe that maintaining communication can mean the difference between life and death. Claire quietly declined all interview requests and submitted only a brief technical report to the airline. Recommend equipping aircraft with adaptive SDR filtering and backup bus B configuration per my tested specifications. She disappeared into the crowd of emergency responders and airport personnel, her silver Pelican case blending in among the dozens of other technical equipment containers scattered around the terminal. The lessons she left behind would be studied in aviation schools and military academies for decades to come. Lesson 1. Never underestimate quiet people. They might be the final link holding entire systems together when everything else fails. Lesson 2. Engineers don't just count bolts. They count the heartbeats of complex systems, keeping humans and machines working together when chaos threatens to tear everything apart. Lesson 3. In an era of electronic warfare, data integrity and disciplined procedures become the shield between civilization and catastrophe. The captain of Atlas 217 found Claire in the departure lounge and embraced her. Today you taught me how to fly without GPS again. I forgot that flying was about more than following computer instructions. A young boy who had been on the flight approached her with a toy airplane, asking her to put a piece of silver tape on the wing, so it won't lose its signal anymore. Claire smiled and carefully placed the tape. Now it has its own navigation corridor. 3 months later, aviation magazines published a grainy photograph showing 2 F-22 Raptors tilting their wings in salute to a commercial airliner. The handwritten caption read simply, 236 souls, Falcon One. Claire left Keflavik Airport wearing a light jacket, her silver badge back in her wallet, disappearing into the stream of international travelers as if she had never been there. But the impact of her actions rippled through multiple industries and institutions. Aviation manufacturers began incorporating her technical modifications into new aircraft designs. Military communication protocols were updated to include the jamming countermeasures she had demonstrated. Emergency response training programs added sections on maintaining order through competence rather than authority. The passengers from Atlas 217 stayed in contact through a social media group dedicated to sharing stories of quiet professionals who stepped forward during crises. They called themselves the 236 and created a scholarship fund for women studying aerospace engineering. Years later, when commercial aircraft encountered electronic interference over remote ocean areas, pilots would sometimes report hearing a calm female voice on backup frequencies, offering technical guidance before fading back into silence. The phenomenon became known among aviation professionals as Falcon's frequency, the mysterious appearance of expert help during the worst emergencies. But Claire Whitlock continued her quiet life as a civilian aerospace engineer, traveling between conferences and technical seminars, always carrying her silver Pelican case with equipment that served dual purposes. She never sought recognition for her actions over the North Atlantic. The silver badge remained hidden in her wallet, and her technical reports were filed under civilian categories that didn't hint at their military applications. A maintenance technician at Keflavik Airport found a note tucked into the electronics bay of Atlas 217 after the repairs were completed, written in precise technical handwriting. For the next engineer who finds this, always carry backup solutions. Lives depend on redundancy. The note became part of the airport's permanent archive, a reminder that some of the most important safety innovations come from people who understand that preparation for the worst-case scenario isn't paranoia, it's responsibility. Claire had proven that heroism often wears civilian clothes and carries an engineering degree, ready to bridge the gap between technology and humanity when everything else fails. If you believe in stories that touch the heart like this one, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to SN Touching Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten. Real people are creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI.